powered by FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. Perfect time to remind you, FanDuel.com/bet-the-board. Make sure you check out all the enhanced odds. Want to welcome all those fine folks in the state of Connecticut who finally have legalized sports betting coming to them today at Mohegan Sun, Foxwoods, and some of the other establishments out in that neck of the woods. FanDuel has you covered. Great, generous sign-up bonuses for not only your NFL action, Major League Baseball, college football, you name it. There's a number on it. FanDuel will have it on their betting menu. Payne, another week down in the National Football League, a dominant performance Monday night from the Dallas Cowboys. Is it time for us to finally buy into them as a legitimate NFC contender?
I do appreciate you mentioning who played Monday, because once that game's over, like my week is, you normally,
Tuesday morning, you wipe the hard drive clean. You have to and come in with a blank slate. So I actually had to look and remind myself that it was the Eagles getting dismantled by the Cowboys on Monday. So don't feel bad.
Not the greatest game plan from Nick Sirianni. Said so after the game. He was like, boy, that was bad. We only ran the ball twice. And I understand the thought process and the philosophy, and it came with, hey, we're going to have Jalen Hurts throw on first down because Dan Quinn doesn't blitz on first down. So there was probably some good intel there in regards to when to attack the Cowboys defense. The problem is just what we said in that game when we broke it down. Like, Jalen Hurts at this point has to be on the move throwing the ball, has to create conflict with his legs. He is not the guy that's going to be under center or in shotgun and just take drops and throw the ball from the pocket. That's just not where he's at right now as a passer, and who knows if he'll ever get there. That's the reason he had to transfer out of Alabama, because he couldn't execute that part of being a quarterback. And we also said that, hey, he had only thrown one pass between the hashes through 2 weeks. And so you become a little bit easier to defend when you're not balanced and running the ball, and you have a quarterback that isn't great from the pocket, throwing from the pocket and only doing so outside the hashes. It makes life a little bit easier for even a Dan Quinn defense, which we again said we thought was going to be a little bit improved based upon where he was moving some parts around. So that's what I saw. Dallas's offense is humming right now. Dak Prescott has been fantastic, but I do know we're going to break the Cowboys down in a little bit.
That we will. Dallas, one of the 5 games that will crack our big bet breakdowns, or whatever the hell we call them around these parts these days. So, you know what? Without much further ado, Payne, let's get right in to the Cowboys showdown this Sunday against the Carolina Panthers, an undefeated Carolina team that'll come rolling into Big D, and the Dallas Cowboys are a 4.5-point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total on the game, 50.5. We are starting to see some 51s pop up through the market. Last meeting in Dallas between these two teams came back in Thanksgiving 2015. The Carolina Panthers rolled the Cowboys 33-14 as modest underdogs. I believe, if memory serves me correct, we had tickets on the Cowboys. Probably lost my lunch midway through the first quarter watching Tony Romo struggle against that defense. When you look at Matt Rule and what he's been able to accomplish, 8-1 against the number as a head coach on the road during his short NFL tenure. When you look at teams since 2015 that are undefeated underdogs in week 4 or later, it's been a profitable scenario, albeit a very small sample size, 10-3 against the spread. But I think, Payne, the biggest question that we have to ask regarding the Carolina Panthers, aside from the hot start from this team defensively, what do we expect from an offense that is now down its primary weapon as Christian McCaffrey has been shelved dealing with that hamstring injury?
This is the big test for Carolina. And, you know, we've seen Sam Darnold to this point pass his first 3 tests with flying colors. If you look at yards per pass attempt, his adjusted completion percentage, his big-time throw rate, his turnover-worthy throws, and his passer rating, he's on pace for career best in all those categories. But this is the game, I think, where we kind of find out if Sam Darnold can be a franchise quarterback, if he can lead an offense without its best playmaker, and if he can handle pressure without the safety valve. And that's really where this becomes interesting. I mean, McCaffrey's essentially played in 2 games. He's been targeted 17 times, caught 16 of them. He was kind of the guy that was helping negate some of the pressure because Carolina's offensive line is not very good. That is the weakness of the Panthers team across the board. They are dead last in pass block win rate. It was a unit that we expected to be one of the bottom feeders, and so far they're playing within the range that we thought they would be. So it's not just what you'll lose in the ground game, but I think, obviously through the air with CMC out, somehow Joe Brady and Sam Darnold are going to have to figure out that adjustment in their passing game. And then you have the, idea of what's going on with Micah Parsons, where he's now working on the edge. Dan Quinn has smartly put him down there. We said that was his best attribute coming out of college. We're not quite sure if this is a great pick as a linebacker, where he's going to have to think, where he's going to have to kind of understand the concepts of offense, and he might not be the best in coverage. But boy, is he a dynamic pass rusher from the linebacker position. Dan Quinn's like, you know what? Let me just make him an end. And so far, he has just been creating havoc. 12 pressures the last 2 games. The Eagles were forced into 5 holding penalties on Monday night. So it wasn't just the pressure they gave up. It wasn't just the sacks they gave up. But they really couldn't keep those guys in front. The other interesting matchup here is Trevon Diggs. I mean, he is turning into, at least through 3 games, a lockdown corner. Is he going to shadow DJ Moore and erase him from the game? We've seen DJ Moore's role really enhance and expand this year. He was basically last year, Todd, just the deep threat guy. Now he's like a bona fide number 1. His target share has been through the roof, averaging double-digit targets. Anderson. But he's been on a milk carton. Now, I think he's probably very important for this game. Is he going to be the guy? We know he's got the deep speed, but is he the guy that you're going to put on the underneath crosser now to kind of replace some of that short passing game? But again, right here, when we get back to DJ Moore and that Trevon Diggs matchup, Trevon Diggs has been fantastic. He's great at the best corner in football through 3 weeks. 10 receptions allowed on 20 targets with 3 picks. He's allowed a 41 passer rating. So if he's able to remove DJ Moore and you're already down CMC, who's the viable pass catching option for Sam Darnold at this point? On paper, it's a really even matchup. Carolina's above average in both rushing and passing efficiency. After Monday night, Dallas is above average in both defensive passing and rushing efficiency. But I think the matchups, within this side of the ball are going to really impact things. And it's, when you kind of break it down, it's like Carolina's O-line, if they can just be average in this game, that'll help. Can Sam Darnold find his replacement safety valve? Is DJ Moore a guy that can dominate this one-on-one matchup against Diggs? That'll ultimately, I think, decide this. The Cowboys' defense has been interesting. That's kind of the best way to put it. All told, they're 5th in adjusted defensive EPA per play. But they also lead the league in takeaways. They're below average in down-to-down success rate, both against the run and pass. They're 28th in the league in explosive pass defense. So, again, I know there's improvement under Dan Quinn. That's very clear. At least the guys have a direction. They at least know what they're doing, what they're being asked to do, unlike last year's defense. When they decided to hire a defensive coordinator, I was like, who? Who did they hire? Who did Mike McCarthy bring in? I just have no idea how good the defense is at this point. And I think ultimately this is a game where we're like, is Carolina's offense for real? Is Dallas's defense for real? We're going to find out.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on in the season, as much as we believe we have a good idea of exactly what some of these teams are on either the offensive or defensive side of the ball, you do get these litmus test games, and I think this is definitely one of them. Because when you watch Dallas's defensive performance against Philadelphia as well, there were still plenty of big plays to be had where Jalen Hurts just wasn't accurate enough with the football. I mean, the perfect illustration was the opening drive coming out in the second half. You get the big play to jumpstart things, and you miss Zach Ertz, who's wide open. The ensuing play, Devontae Smith falls down, Trevon Diggs jumps the route, and a game that could have been 20-10 or 20-14 suddenly becomes 27-7, and the Cowboys are able to play downhill the remainder of the game and take away some of that Eagles ground game that was non-existent. Now, on the other side,
even early in the game, right? Like Jalen Reagor was wide open on the deep ball that's just underthrown by probably 10 yards that causes the interception.
No, thankfully for that. That's the one that led to the defensive touchdown, though, at least, right? So semi-negate that, but you're right. I mean, there are shots to be had, and you wonder if Sam Darnold will be able to take full advantage of it. And I guess we'll see how Carolina elects to use their tandem of running backs between Chuba Hubbard and Royce Freeman, who, as you alluded to, don't provide that pass-catching element out of the backfield that makes Christian McCaffrey the league's best in that particular department. And now on the other side, Carolina's defense, they've been the real surprise story of the early season. Things get a little bit more difficult as you lose J.C. Horn, expected to be out for the remainder of the regular season. To Carolina's credit, they go out there and they acquire a former first-round pick in C.J. Henderson, but you're also down nickel defender Miles Hartfield and a starting safety in Justin Burris, which won't help, but I don't want to bury the lead where Carolina, hey, look, they're holding their opponents to less than 200 yards per game. They've held opposing passing attacks in check. They've been good against the run. They're getting after opposing quarterbacks with Hassan Reddick and Brian Burns. But the Cowboys' offense is a much different animal than taking on the Jets, the Saints, or, of course, the lowly Texans.
Same side or same thing on this side of the ball for me. We're going to find out a lot, because you've kind of hesitated there. I could tell it in your tone that you weren't quite sure what Carolina's defense is. And like you, we called for an increase in production. We thought all those young guys that were drafted last year, and then adding a J.C. Horn to it and having Brian Burns kind of turn into that premier pass rusher would help this defense. You have Phil Snow in year 2 teaching his principles, all of those things. And you're seeing a Carolina defense right now that's the most efficient in the NFL. They're number 1 against the run, number 1 against the pass, number 1 in pass rush win rate, you name it. But you got Zach Wilson in his first NFL start. You got Davis Mills on a short week in his first NFL start. And a Saints team without any receivers on a week where 7 of their offensive staff members weren't available, including their O-line coach and pass game coordinator. Now you can only play who's on the schedule, right? It's great the Panthers have dominated those teams, but this is the real test. And I'm thankful that the organization said, hey, we're 3-0. Like, we believe we're legitimate. We're going to make a run at this thing. And so you go out and you get C.J. Henderson to kind of help fill that void of J.C. Horn. Henderson was a guy that Carolina debated taking with the 7th pick in the 2020 draft. So they got him for a fraction of their perceived value, which is a no-brainer for them. But the loss of J.C. Horn is massive. And we'll see if that ultimately changes the philosophy of what Phil Snow tries to employ here. Because Carolina is a team right now that's playing super aggressive. It's almost like a 5-2-4 with tight man coverage outside, and they also blitz at like a 37% rate. And without J.C. Horn in this matchup, you're wondering if the secondary can hold up. And so this is really the first big test for Carolina's defense. I don't know if that style is going to play here against Cooper and Lamb. If it can, it's likely because the front 5 and the blitzes are getting home and giving Dak trouble. Dallas is 30th in pass block win rate through 3 games. Horrific number there, but I will say when I watch Dak play so far, he's been fantastic. He has been great pre-snap, and he's talented enough post-snap. And so despite the O-line being the 3rd worst in the league through 3 games, Dak's been pressured at the 23rd highest clip in the NFL at 29%. Matt Rule came out, I don't know if you heard this, but just super high praise for Dak. He flat out said on film, it's like watching Peyton Manning. It's like watching Drew Brees call a game at the line of scrimmage. What Dak's doing right now is unbelievably impressive. And that's the same thing I'm seeing. So Dak to this point is really good at seeing what's coming most of the time, audible around that pressure, and then get the ball out quickly and get it to where it needs to go. It's possible that means we see more of like a short passing attack here. You'd think maybe the running backs get involved through the air. But what's interesting is the other part of Phil Snow's defense is that he plays with 3 safeties on the field. So as soon as it's run, those guys are crashing down. If it's short pass to a back, they're immediately sniffing that out. And so Carolina has only given up 8 receptions for 54 yards to running backs through 3 games. But this, again, just comes down to some real interesting matchups within this game. And it's, Carolina's corners, are they going to be able to hold up in coverage without J.C. Horn? I think we're going to find out pretty quickly. Can the Cowboys protect Dak up front against this 5-man front that pressures with a bunch of exotic blitzes? If Carolina's corners can hold up in man and they get to Dak, they're going to win this game. If we find out Carolina's secondary can't hold up against man and Lamb and Cooper are just going nuts and Dak's doing a great job negating pressure with things pre-snap and getting the ball out quickly post-snap, the Cowboys are going to cover. But that's really how important those two matchups are on this side of the ball, Todd.
Yeah, I think when you look at the way these two teams will play out, now obviously the Cowboys had expectations to win the division and get to the playoffs, knowing how talented that offense is. Carolina, meanwhile, in a bit of a transition season, and I think odds makers have been reluctant to buy into them. Carolina, despite their 3-0 start, still underdogs to make the postseason, and when you look at some of their adjusted win totals, an uphill battle, but a win over Dallas on a short week for the Cowboys would go a long way in terms of cementing Carolina as one of those fringe contenders, figuring that they're still very much a long shot to win the division, knowing that Tampa Bay has much more of a pedigree in that particular department. From the early session pane into the afternoon, and we'll head out to SoFi Stadium where we'll see if the Rams can run it back. This time they welcome in a division foe in the Arizona Cardinals. You're looking at the Rams, a modest 4.5-point home favorite in this matchup. Total been bet up to 55 here. When you look at this recent series history between these two teams, well, it's been one-sided, and that might be a bit of an understatement. The Rams have absolutely owned the Cardinals under Sean McVay's leadership, going 8-0 straight up, 7-0-1 against the spread. Average margin of victory in those games, 20 points per game. It's actually the third longest divisional win streak right now in the NFL. The last Cardinals quarterback to beat the Rams, Carson Palmer, way back in 2016. Arizona has a little bit of revenge, of course, on their mind for Week 17, a game they lost that would have sent them to the postseason, where you had the all-important heavyweight matchup between John Wolford getting the start for the Rams and Chris Streveler that got the nod for the Arizona Cardinals. When you look at the way that Arizona has struggled, it's been the Rams' defense that's made all the difference in the world. They've held the Cardinals to 10 points or fewer in 4 of those 6 matchups. But this is an Arizona team that looks and feels a little bit different. Payne, should we be buying into Arizona as a legitimate contender as it pertains to their upset prospects this weekend against the Rams?
Yeah, I think that's really where things get interesting is with this matchup, because Kyler's only been around since 2019, and the defense in which the Rams have been employing recently weren't there, obviously, pre 2020. So those things and elements have changed a little bit within this matchup. And I'll be candid, I don't have a ton on this game simply because I'm still trying to figure out what to do with it in terms of the side of the total. But it would feel like the Rams have exerted a lot of energy and effort last week in a game where they wanted to prove to themselves and to the league that, hey, like we're a legitimate Super Bowl contender here. You could tell McVay was bought in. I think he actually was clocked at a faster 50-yard sprint than Deshaun Jackson was loafing into the end zone there after the touchdown. So
I've never seen a head coach get that excited for a missed field goal. I'm not going to lie, Payne.
Unreal. So what we're seeing early in this week, obviously, is money on Arizona. It's come down from 6 to 4.5. I'm just intrigued to see what kind of success Arizona has, because obviously Streveler isn't really the test to the Rams defense that's gaugeable here. Last week against Jacksonville, Arizona's drives were so backed up, they never really got going. And obviously things turn around. They were somewhat efficient on early downs, and then you get the pick 6 defensively. But what's interesting about the matchup is you have an Arizona offense that just, when I watch it, they're a little frustrating. I know everyone just loves the air raid, but there's just no real structure to how Kingsbury runs it. There's a reason Arizona is one of the most penalized teams on offense the last few seasons, because you have this backyard brand of football and offense where, bless you, where Kyler's improvising and he's holding on to the ball, and like play 1 of the drive isn't called or designed necessarily to set something up for play 5 of the drive. And the Rams defense right now is one that kind of forces you to be perfect, right? It wants you to be methodical, moving the ball down the field. The Rams want to keep everything in front, make you earn it. And so ultimately the question becomes, can Arizona go 8, 10, 12 plays and finish drives with touchdowns rather than imploding and having drives end in 3 because of penalties or no points because Kyler's turning it over, where he decides to get impatient pushing the ball downfield against this shell secondary. We know DeAndre Hopkins has been battling a minor injury. Does Jalen Ramsey just kind of remove him from the game and put it on A.J. Green and Rondell Moore to go out and win this thing? We also have to check the status of Arizona's offensive line. Kelvin Beachum, Justin Murray, Justin Pugh, All three have injuries. None of them have practiced to this point in the week. Today, Thursday, obviously is the vital day to kind of figure out if guys are going to play or not. So you're going to want to check that injury report because Arizona down 3 offensive linemen would not be very good. But the key here is obviously if Arizona is going to have success offensively, it means that they're not self-imploding. And if they can limit the mistakes and get touchdowns instead of 3, obvious, but this is kind of just what Arizona is offensively, then they'll have a great chance to stay within this number.
When you look at the other side of the ball, the Rams offense has obviously flourished through a limited sample size with Matthew Stafford as their starting quarterback. Points per game up to a shade less than 32 a contest from 23.3. The Rams haven't done it of the cheap variety either. 11 touchdown drives of at least 70 yards. Stafford has thrown 9 touchdown passes, and when you look at the Rams, they're scoring on a league high 58.6% of its possessions. Meanwhile, one of the things that we've seen from the Rams, a staple of their success in the last couple of years, has been utilizing play action. Well, while that component of the offense has been extremely effective so far this year, you're seeing a lot more empty sets, which conveys the level of trust clearly that Sean McVay has in Matthew Stafford, his ability to get the ball out quickly and potentially offer up a few of those deep opportunities where you can utilize a talent like Deshaun Jackson running by defenders.
There's no question that Sean McVay has real confidence in Matthew Stafford. He was the perfect fit for this offense, and he saw it, and he was adamant, and he was aggressive and told the organization, go get my guy, because he understood what Matthew Stafford could bring to this offense, and it's a deep passing attack, which they did not have in previous years with Jared Goff running the show. And then you go out and you get a Deshaun Jackson who, at his age, is still one of the premier deep ball threats, and Van Jefferson has also been very good on the outside, emerging in year 2, and then you have Kupp and Woods in the slot just dominating. What is Arizona's defense? And I think that's ultimately the big question here. They haven't been able to stop the run. We know they made some splash signings in free agency. We were concerned about their secondary, although that's been shockingly good. But you start to look at schedule a little bit. And Arizona's defense played Tennessee the first game of the season, where they're breaking in a new offensive coordinator and a new play caller. Tennessee right now just, yikes, 24th in passing efficiency through 3 games. Obviously, you played Jacksonville last week. The Jags are 30th in passing efficiency, and somehow Trevor Lawrence goes out, plays his best game of the season and then of his career to this point. We talked about, I think, that on Monday, how Trevor Lawrence is the very first game where he's had a completion percentage above expectation against this Cardinals secondary. Here's the not so bold prediction. Arizona's defense isn't going to finish anywhere close to where they're currently at, which is 3rd in defensive pass efficiency. Robert Alford, at age 33, after not playing 2 seasons, is on pace to have his 2nd best season ever. Byron Murphy is having his best season ever. And you pair that with a really poor pass schedule, and this is kind of what you're getting here. But this is obviously a far different animal. And the 1+ passing attack that Arizona's faced so far was Minnesota, and they got shredded. Kirk Cousins in that game, and you mentioned play action at the top, so this is perfect, the nugget I have. Kirk Cousins in that game off play action had a perfect passer rating. 9 for 9, 2 touchdowns, 13.6 yards attempt. Well, Matthew Stafford right now is graded out the 2nd best play action quarterback to date. So while he is operating from shotgun formation a little bit more than we saw Jared Goff, because Jared Goff obviously had to be managed a little bit more, and play action helps quarterbacks, Matthew Stafford, when he's being asked to throw with play action, which is roughly 24% of the time, he has been absolutely killer doing it. So look out for that matchup as well. Now, you do wonder, is there this hangover effect from last week? I do think the Rams are going to score here and score plenty. It just is a matter of, when do they wake up? Are the first few possessions a little slow? But it is a division game. You're both 3-0. This is, again, one of those big games where you go out and you beat Tampa, and then you follow that up with taking hold of first place in the division. We don't know if we're going to see a sleepy start here. That's the big question. But Arizona, to this point of the week, has been extremely sharp. And the guy who bet it, I really respect. So it's tough to make a case any other way, especially if you're kind of picking games in your pool. You want to be a little bit more contrarian, because the pool that you're going to be in is going to be all Rams.
There is no doubt about it. The other thing to keep in mind as well, yes, it's a division game, like you mentioned. The Rams will go up to Seattle on a short week for another pivotal divisional matchup on Thursday. So you wonder, given the dominance they've had against the Cardinals, if they're able to maintain razor-like focus here, given they've shown up, they've clamped down, and Arizona has really struggled to do much of anything against this Rams stop unit in some of the recent meetings. We'll stay in the best division in football, Payne, where Seattle and San Francisco will do battle. The Seahawks come into this contest at 1-2, having lost back-to-back games against a 49ers team that was slightly better. End-of-game awareness might have been 3-0 coming into this contest, where San Francisco is a 2.5-point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's gone back and forth between 2.5 and 3. Total on the game sits at 52. And when you look at one quarterback's dominance of another team, well, Russell Wilson has owned the San Francisco 49ers in his career, compiling a 15-4 straight-up record in 19 games against them, a 13-5-1 against the spread mark. Those straight-up numbers improved to even 12-2 over the last 14 meetings, accounting for the third-best divisional record of any quarterback against one team for a sample size that long. And when you look at Sunday, it'll snap a string of 11 straight games where the Seahawks will enter as a favorite. Seahawks, of course, blowing double-digit leads in back-to-back weeks. A lot of questions surfacing about this stop unit, looking a lot more like the group we saw weeks 1 through 9 than the one that led the league against inferior passing attacks weeks 10 through 17 from a points-per-game standpoint. But I ask you this question. Given Seattle's struggles against the Titans in the second half, against the Vikings last week, are the 49ers as equipped to attack this Seahawks defense where they're the most vulnerable?
Again, when I look at this game, and I know we talked a little bit of it off air, a lot of variance. You see San Francisco offense that's 10th in offensive efficiency, and you kind of think about what's transpired this year, and you say to yourself, Jimmy G's just kind of working his way back, and the running backs have been decimated by injury, and you're just kind of thinking to yourself, like, Kyle Shanahan is the wizard that we thought he was, but there's room for improvement for this offense that's already top 10. What I have seen from film, what I have seen in the numbers and a lot of the metrics that we come over, Jimmy G is not playing well right now. The offense has been good in spite of him. Now, second half against Green Bay, maybe that provides some confidence that's much needed. And that's what maybe takes his game, that confidence level, to playing closer to the 2019 Super Bowl run level of Jimmy G. We'll see. But through 3 games against Detroit, Philadelphia, and Green Bay, 3 defenses with an average efficiency rank of 24th, Jimmy G's graded out the 26th best quarterback in the NFL. His completion percentage 1% below expectation. It looks like he's afraid to get hit. His adjusted completion percentage is 55 when he's pressured. 15% turnover-worthy throw rate when pressured. But what Seattle's defense are we going to get here? What do they actually have to offer? And I mean, just, my God. Like, you watched the Minnesota game last week more than I did. That is one of the most unorganized defensive efforts that I've ever seen, which is so bizarre.
That's an insult to being unorganized. I'm not going to lie.
And when you think about how a defense can be unorganized like that, it's like most of the parts from last season are there. You have a coordinator that's been in Seattle over 9 years during 2 stints. How can you look like you have no idea what's going on? You'd expect that from a first-year defensive coordinator breaking in a brand new season, breaking in a brand new system with guys that maybe don't fit his scheme, but not from Seattle. That was just so bizarre to me. And so that would make me nervous if you're getting lost on defense, you're not communicating, guys have no idea what they're doing and where they're supposed to be against a Kyle Shanahan offense that puts you in conflict with its window dressing and its constant use of motion. Seattle can't cover right now. That's been an issue that we've talked about for a couple years. 57% of passes have grade successful through 3 weeks against the Seahawks defense. That's 31st in the league. Kirk Cousins took it one step further last week, 69% passing success rate. 61% of Kirk Cousins' passes went for a first down or a touchdown. So Seattle just doesn't have the pieces on the back end to cover. They let Shaquille Griffin walk in free agency. I know that price tag that Jacksonville paid him was a little nutty, so I get it. But you didn't replace him. And we know Jamal Adams' limitations in coverage. He hasn't given up a touchdown or gobs of yards yet. That's coming. but he's allowed 6 catches on 7 targets. They're not really putting him in position to really cover anybody because they know he's not very good at doing that. The one area of Seattle's defense that was stout last season was against the run. That's below average to this point of the season. So if San Francisco gets their outside zone run system going here, that's only going to make life easier for when Jimmy G does go to pass it. But this game to me, Todd, is just like this is the Variance Bowl. And since we're calling it the Variance Bowl, we'd bet the board would be able to sponsor it. I've just struggled with this game because there's just so many massive moving parts. And I got to a point where it's just like I'm going to close my eyes and think about nothing here and just focus on the number. And the number says that there is some value here in Seattle.
When you look at the other side of the ball, obviously the 49ers are an absolute mash unit defensively. Secondary, I mean, you probably wouldn't recognize half those guys if they were properly labeled in a team picture. Against the Seattle offense that's been good in spurts, but is really bogged down in the second half of each of the last couple of games. And I don't want to blame Russell Wilson, who, when you look at his numbers so far this season, a 134 passer rating, more than 10 yards per attempt, has yet to throw a pick. And when you look at how he's performed on deep balls, 4 passing touchdowns on throws 20 yards downfield, he's got the bevy of weapons at his disposal. Yet Seattle, for whatever reason, can't seem to maintain that level of consistency. And at crucial times over the last 2 games, they haven't been able to get the drive when they desperately need it.
Very difficult to identify the 49ers corners, as you alluded to. If you've noticed, they've gone with the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. I guess that's some solidarity there for the secondary. I don't know what's going on or what we're going to get from Seattle's offense. The Seahawks look like a team that can make a Super Bowl run with how they've played in the first half. But they look like one of the worst teams in the league in the second half. And if you break that out, Seattle's first half of games this year, 62% success rate on offense. It's the second best mark in football. Seattle's the most explosive offense in the first half as well. Shane Waldron's come out and shown like a real ability to watch film and come out with a fantastic game plan and script. It doesn't shock me. He spent time under Sean McVay. The problem is Waldron really hasn't shown an ability to counter the adjustment of the opposing defense and change things at halftime. Because Seattle goes from one of the best offenses in the league to start games to an offense that dips to a 46% success rate in the second half, is 25th in passing success rate, 29th in explosiveness. Seattle's offense in the second half just completely falls off a cliff. Now, could be total randomness over a meaningless 3-game sample size, and we know the NFL is not a sample size sport. But it could be worth something there could be something really here that we absolutely have to monitor. Because, again, these first and second half splits are just so staggering. Seattle scored 0 points in the third quarter this season. If you get Seattle's offense to play like the second best one in the league for a full 60 minutes, they win this game outright. When you look at the disparity and some of the post-game implied points from last week versus actual points scored, Seattle was one of the unluckiest offenses in the league, so maybe they bounce back a little bit. It's possible that we see an uptick. The offense in general across the board still top 5 in EPA per play, and it's because of that explosiveness in the first half. If Seattle's offensive line can hold up here in pass protection, I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for Lockett and Metcalf downfield. San Francisco's 20th in explosive pass defense. That's a big if, right? I know on the surface it would appear as if Seattle's O-line is kind of holding up well for the parts they actually have, 13th in pass block win rate. But Russell Wilson's been pressured on more than 40% of his dropbacks. And we hear all the time, pressure is a quarterback stat, not an offensive line stat. But Russell Wilson's time to throw is well above average this season. It's actually the 10th fastest among qualifying quarterbacks. So if Seattle's O-line shows up here, the Seahawks can be explosive. Shane Waldron has to do a better job adjusting, and the defense has to get Russell Wilson the ball back. Least amount of time of possession in the league with just 23 minutes for Seattle's offense. Part of the problem, Shane Waldron kind of learning the ropes and figuring out how to counterpunch. But the other clear problem here, Todd, is Seattle's defense is just killing their offense.
I mean, that's been the reality. Seattle's offense has had to carry the burden of proof, not just through the first couple of games this year, and they haven't been able to do so, but over the last couple of years, as we've seen a deterioration of that Seattle stop unit. Not quite sure they get right in a hurry in a divisional game, but one that should go a long way in determining who wants to try and avoid falling potentially 2 games behind the winner of that Rams-Cardinals showdown that we previewed a little bit earlier in the show. All right, Payne, we move from the NFC to the AFC, where it's the Denver Broncos putting their undefeated record on the line as they'll welcome in the Baltimore Ravens. Game right now, a pick'em at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total in this contest sits at 44.5. Obviously, we know with the Broncos, the combined record of their trio of opponents, 0-9 so far this year, but to Denver's credit, they've at least taken care of all of those opponents in dominant fashion. Their margin of victory this year, plus 50, it's tied with the Bills for the best in the league. And when you look at NFL recent history, no team has started the season with 4 straight double-digit wins since the Denver Broncos did so back in 2013. Ironically enough, this will be the 4th time Denver is favored this year. They were the only team in the National Football League last year that wasn't favored in a single game. And the storyline that should be fun to watch for any Louisville Cardinal football fan, a pair of first-round draft picks going head-to-head in Teddy Bridgewater and Lamar Jackson. But pain injuries starting to become a major concern for the Denver Broncos, especially on the offensive side of the ball, but they also lost their field general in Josie Jewell defensively.
I completely forgot about that. You're right. It is the Battle of Louisville. I think when we look at the Broncos offense, there is a debate here, right? This is kind of the time of year where you start to get some data points, but within those data points, you have to be cognizant of what they mean based upon who they've played. And so you're asking yourself, is this going to be a jump up in class for Denver's offense? And on the surface, it would appear to be. I mean, you look at the Broncos, they've beaten 3 teams that are combined 0-9. 0-9. None of those 3 teams have great defenses at the moment. The average efficiency rank of those 3 is 22nd. Baltimore, though, is kind of living on reputation. And that's just kind of the vibe that I've got. You look at their defensive adjusted efficiency, 20th right now. And I understand they played the Raiders, they played the Chiefs, small sample size, so those 2 great offenses skew things. There's been gobs of injuries defensively. But back in August, we called for defensive regression from Baltimore. My gut does say, though, when the dust settles, that this is going to be an above-average Ravens defense, one that maybe knocks on the door of the top 10. So this is probably a little bit of a tick up for Denver's offense. Where things get interesting is seeing if Denver changes who they are and what they've been to start the season offensively. Bridgewater, right now, averaging 3.1 seconds to throw. He's holding the ball way more this year than in the past. He's kind of hunting for bigger plays downfield. He's heard all of the negativity about being a game manager and Teddy Two Gloves is just, Captain Checkdown. And he wants to hold the starting quarterback job. And if that's what it takes to hold the ball a little bit longer and push the ball downfield, that's what he's going to do, I guess. Bridgewater's holding it the 3rd longest time of any of the qualifying quarterbacks through 3 weeks, and you can see how it's helped the ADOT 2 yards further than his career average. The question now is, will that work against Baltimore? The Ravens are only 22nd in pass rush win rate, so they haven't done a great job up front. Whether pressured or blitzed, Teddy's done a fantastic job so far. 87% adjusted accuracy under pressure with a 112 passer rating. 92% adjusted accuracy and a 130 passer rating when blitzed. Right now, Baltimore's only sent blitz 31% of opponent dropbacks. It's a little light for them. I mean, there were years where they were in the mid 50 percentile. That's typically not Wink Martindale style. I think there's some noise in that number because they only blitzed Mahomes 6 times. There was that transition we kind of called for, like make an adjustment, adapt, and so that's why it's skewing things. They've been much more pressure happy in the other 2 games. But that'll be one of the biggest matchups. Does Baltimore get to Teddy? Denver's O-line, 9th in pass block win rate right now, but they're struggling. I think there's 2 guys potentially dealing with some injuries along Denver's O-line, so that can change some things a little bit. But that'll be the key. If Teddy's pressured and he resorts back to the quick, short pass game, that could change things because KJ Hamler tore his ACL. Jerry Jeudy's out with the high ankle sprain. Both those guys are great after the catch. That's who you would ideally have when you're dumping the ball off quickly because pressure's coming. Make those linebackers that have issues in coverage defend the crossers, defend KJ Hamler over the middle after the catch. That's how you could combat this. But now those guys aren't there. It becomes a little bit more difficult when your main weapons are Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick, 2 outside receivers that are more of downfield guys, more physical guys, not the best run after the catch, creating with the ball in your hands kind of guys. So Hamler and Judy's skill sets are absolutely going to be missed here. But if Teddy's not pressured and he keeps holding on to the ball for, 3+ seconds and pushing it downfield, then that can change because the Broncos do have the outside guys still. But you got to check that injury report with the Broncos offensive line. That's the key to this thing is pressure, because I think Teddy's going to do a good job under pressure, as the numbers indicate. But who is going to be the guy to catch it when he decides to throw short when the pressure comes? Who's the guy that can make plays after the catch? Is it Noah Fant? I think we're still kind of just waiting for that dude to break out. We just know how talented he is. It's just, hasn't quite happened yet. Maybe he's the guy. But that'll be the big thing to watch.
Yeah, and you mentioned those injuries along the Denver offensive line. Never a great sign early in the week when you're calling up two guys from the practice squad or signing them to the active roster. An indication that while you may receive a questionable designation as far as the injury report is concerned, probably not trending in the right direction, but a lot of things can change from Thursday morning until kickoff on Sunday. On the other side of the ball, Payne, when you look at this Baltimore Ravens team, they've rushed for 100 yards in 42 straight games, one shy of the NFL record set by the Steelers franchise back in the mid-70s. The Ravens again lead the league in rushing at 185 yards per game. The Broncos, through their first 3 games, second against the run, giving up less than 60 a crack. The interesting part about it, though, Lamar Jackson has taken to being more of a deep thrower, at least early on in the season. We knew all the reports out of camp were that Greg Roman and company wanted to open up this attack a little bit. There could be a potential reinforcement on the horizon as well for Baltimore if first-round draft pick Rashad Bateman is made available for Sunday. But when you look at what Lamar is doing, an average distance of target, 12.3 yards downfield, it's more than Josh Allen in terms of being a league leader against a Denver defense known for being extremely stout in the secondary. How do you see things playing out on this side of the ball?
Well, the first thing Baltimore is going to have to overcome is the situation. I mean, the schedule in terms of travel has just been brutal. You had the last 2 preseason games on the road, 3 of 4 regular season games on the road, including 2 trips to different time zones. So 5 road games in the last 6 total. And on top of that, you get a Ravens offense that is stepping up in class. The average efficiency rank of its opponents so far, 25th in efficiency to this point, right? Vic Fangio in Denver, 5th. So there is that element of a very poor travel schedule kind of coming into play here, a step up in class. Those typically don't bode very well. Now, nobody truly matches up with Lamar Jackson. And I think this is probably going to oversimplify some things, but defenses with more speed really help when trying to defend that dude. Because he is, to your point, been electric. I believe he's averaging the most yards per completion while also averaging the most yards per rush among qualifiers. When you look at Vic Fangio's defense, he plays a 4-2-5. 5 defensive backs kind of provide that speed. And where the matchup gets interesting is if Patrick Surtain, our boy Bryce Callahan, and Kyle Fuller are able to play on islands in man coverage, then things change. Because if those guys can hold up doing that, then you can have Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons, 2 very good safeties against the run, fly down into the box and make plays. I mean, Kareem Jackson just blows dudes up. It's actually pretty fun to watch. He is an old school guy. How healthy is Lamar right now? Last week was a DNP on Wednesday and Thursday. Adam Schefter tweeted out that Lamar's hip was bothering him because of the backflip he did into the end zone against Kansas City. That was immediately deleted, and Baltimore came to his defense and said, No. He's illness. He's been sick 97 times in the last 18 months. Illness. Now, all of a sudden, a week later, Lamar missed practice again due to back injury. Let's see if he's out there today. I don't believe he's 100%. He had just a 38% passing success rate against Detroit last week. The passing game only survived because of that explosiveness against a Lions secondary that came into the season as one of the worst, and it was without its 2 best corners. Lamar on the ground, okay, efficiency-wise, but just 1 explosive run. I'm not sure what the backfield duties are going to look like this week, but if Tyson Williams only gets 5 carries again, and the combination of Latavius Murray and Devontae Freeman outpace Tyson, the Ravens are going to lose a lot of juice offensively. I mean, if Murray or Freeman's in this game, then Denver's ends can just get wide quickly, force a handoff up the middle to 2 backs past their prime, and let them pick up 3 or 4 yards. Unfortunately, Bradley Chubb is out, set for ankle surgery. Hopefully he's back before the end of the season. But at least when Tyson Williams is in the backfield, you have 2 legitimate home run threats that can break a 75-yarder every time. So if you crash down and force Lamar to hand it off, at least there's a real threat with Tyson Williams. The other two guys, you're like, right? Like, no biggie. Take it out of Lamar's hand and give it to this slow running back past his prime. Like, awesome. You did our job for us. That's a gigantic win in the grand scheme of things, removing the ball from Lamar's hands. You just kind of look at this, and I don't understand what Baltimore's doing offensively. I think, obviously, again, Lamar's numbers look great, so you can kind of just get away with it. To me, we're going to see Denver be smart here. They're going to crash the ends, and if those two backs are in there, you say, hey, okay, beat us. 3, 4, 5, 6 yards a pop. I don't think an offensive coordinator that's sophisticated is like rolling around in his home office at nights like being like, aha, I think I found the key to 2021 offense. We're going to hand it off to Devontae Freeman and Latavius Murray. And so if Denver can do that defensively, just force it out of Lamar's hands, this game changes unless Tyson Williams smartly gets inserted into this game and makes some plays. So you're going to see Denver create conflict at the mesh point. If Lamar keeps it, then that's where Denver's speed, playing 5 guys in the secondary, comes into play. It helps having, obviously the aforementioned tandem of safeties of Jackson and Simmons to clean those things up. Let's keep an eye. You kind of hinted at this at the top. What happens with not just Rashad Bateman, but also Miles Boykin? Both were activated from injured reserve yesterday. Baltimore has a 21-day window before they actually have to be moved to the 53-man roster, which means they could both play this weekend or 3 Sundays from now. So keep an eye there because Bateman could absolutely change this game if he's ready to help outside in those one-on-one coverages. And if he can consistently win those, then suddenly Fangio has to change his defense, right? It probably means one less guy dedicated to the box to stop the run, and that can change the complexion of this game.
Should be one of the more fascinating matchups as far as the AFC pecking order is concerned. When you look at this Denver Broncos team, a lot of people, including ourselves, had high expectations coming into the season. Haven't really been tested yet, but to their credit, they've exceeded expectations in the eyes of odds makers. They've been dominant, and their defense hasn't had to defend in the red zone in subsequent games as Jacksonville and the Jets failed to enter the Denver red zone either of the past 2 Sundays. On to the Sunday night affair, Payne. But before we do that, I feel it's the perfect time to get a fresh perspective on what the books may or may not be rooting for this coming weekend. He joins us every Thursday here on the Bet the Board podcast. You, of course, can follow John Sheeran on Twitter at JSheeran, JSheeran1981 there as well. And John, we missed you on last Thursday's show, but apparently you had a better offer. You care to share with the listeners where you spent the weekend, my friend?
I managed to spend the weekend, Todd, and you're right, it was a better offer at the Ryder Cup, although looking at the European performance, I may take some of that back. But unfortunately, I was traveling last Thursday, so couldn't join you guys, and glad to be back this week, though.
Always happy to have you. I know our listeners shot us emails and go, hey, where's John's bookmaker report? Apparently, me doing the rendition, like I told you, I wasn't going to use an Irish accent to share some of those liabilities. Wasn't quite the same depth of information that you've provided for us. But, when you look at the first couple weeks of the season, we talked off air a little bit. Been a good start for the house so far with the rash of underdogs that have come in, or how have the results been for the FanDuel guys?
Yeah, the results have been really good. Unfortunately, I say it every week, we're all here to make money, but seeing the bit of a massacre that the NFL season through week 3 has been is a little disappointing. I would have rather it was a more evenly spread one. The results have been great from our perspective. I think the only saving grace is obviously the kind of increase in scoring a little bit this season and plenty of overs hitting, particularly in the higher profile games and the primetime games. And I think that's been the only saving grace for the public.
It's always interesting when you look at some of the trends and knowing as more and more markets come on board. Of course, Connecticut will get things rolling today at the Foxwoods Mohegan area as well to try and figure out some of those recreational bettors and some of the habits as they get into the markets, obviously wanting to bet the teams coming into the season that they thought were going to be elite. And when you look at the pecking order here, a lot of the playoff teams from a season ago sitting in last place in their division. And while we know the Kansas City Chiefs' struggles are well documented from an against the spread standpoint, all these short road favorites going down, I have to imagine, not exactly kind to the recreational bettors bankroll.
No, exactly. I mean, it's funny you say that because we look at it every year and rank in the NFL of which teams are the most popular bet over the season. And effectively it goes as you might expect, from good to bad. And there's a little bit of a bias for some of the local teams. But I think when you're a Giants fan and you go 0-3 and lose at home to the Falcons last week, that's probably the final straw. So I expect some of those guys to jump off that bandwagon. I think the Jets fans jumped off about 10 years ago, so we're okay for them.
Payne, we may have to get John to hang a will New York go 0-34 prop and try and get advantageous odds there for all those Jets and Giants fans going through the pain and misery rooting for that number one pick to at least have something to root for given their team's futility.
No doubt about it. And as we kind of look at those two teams this week, the Jets, the Giants, both those lines a touch inflated. Both have come down from where the opener was. Have you seen any money come in on the Jets and Giants this week?
Not really. I think it's a mixture of where the market is against where we pitch it. I think I talk about it every week, how, overreaction, how heavily weighted we rely on our priors. I think for those two reasons, it's natural that we'll see, the lines move, at least based on any sort of sharp action, any sort of bet we lay towards those things. I think the Giants, we only made them 6.5 point underdogs. We're on the low end. I think we're -7, -115 overnight. So that's one that we're happy to lay on New Orleans. And like I said, we may well have to lick our wounds on Sunday evening, but I tend to find ourselves a lot of the time on these teams that have started poorly just because we can't adjust our priors enough, can't adjust our weightings enough. And then I think the New Orleans Saints is an interesting one. I think, I saw Sean Payton defending their strategy and scheme last week, only throwing it 20 times. And, they may not be the best placed team to take advantage of a pretty weak Giants team. So 7 feels like a lot in that game. And probably similar with the Jets. I haven't looked, in close depth at the Jets game. We made that 6.5 as well, actually. And I think the market's currently, maybe 7 from 7.5 or so. So it doesn't surprise me that, we'll move quickly given where our numbers are, should we see any sort of money for those two teams.
Makes complete sense with the possibility of both A.J. Brown and Julio Jones being out for the Titans as well. It's been a slow week in terms of what we've seen come in on the board. Is anything standing out to this point in terms of other sharp action?
Yeah, like you say, it's been really sharp. I'm pretty surprised by it. Our sharpest players really just centered around Arizona at +6. That's obviously 4.5 right now. I think at 4.5, we're really happy with that number. We made this closer to 5, so I expect to see plenty of Rams money. We've seen a lot of money for the Rams this week in the outrights, laid some big bets on them on Tuesday to win the Super Bowl and their conference at 9 and 5-1 respectively. Got some follow-up at +850 on the Rams, so I think we're about 8-1 right now. But seeing plenty of heat on them makes obvious sense. We were pretty high on them. So at 4.5 right now, I think we're happy to pitch a tent against Arizona in that game.
Makes complete sense there in terms of liability with the public coming in and maybe making the book a little bit lopsided. Any sides or totals that the book will be rooting for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously all centers around Mr. Brady again. I spoke on Tuesday to the Boston Globe and told them at that stage I had never really seen as much interest in a game that early in the week, and that's continued to be the trend this week. On the spread at 7 right now, we've taken just over 5,500 bets on the entire game at 7, and 314 of them have been on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I get it. I think even the Patriot fans probably get it. Everybody's going to be on Tampa Bay this week. I think we were 6.5 on Tuesday when I spoke to that reporter. We're 7 now. There's no way I can see this game move towards New England from an X&O perspective. The secondary, and you can pass the ball a little bit on Tampa Bay, but I'm not sure New England have the weapons to take advantage of it. So for me, I don't know that I love 7, but I definitely wouldn't be taking New England.
I'm not sure many of us make Tampa a 10-point favorite on a neutral against the Saints. When you look at that game in terms of the pace of tickets coming in, is it possible that game could be the most bet in FanDuel history?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll have to just check back on last year's Super Bowl and where that ranks against the Ravens and the Chiefs from this year. But this is for sure, if this momentum keeps up, there's every possibility that this will be our highest staking NFL game of the season, and that may well be enough to get past where we were in the Super Bowl. I'll keep a close eye on that, maybe give you an update before kickoff, but it's definitely really heavily bet, and like I said, completely lopsided.
John, when you walk through a game like this, to kind of piggyback Payne's question, for a lot of our listeners that this may be their first foray into sports betting and kind of following the markets, you talked about the price opening at 6.5, getting one-sided action. I would assume largely from the general betting public, driving it up to 7. What keeps that number in line with a touchdown before you guys would consider the idea of dangling that 7.5 and maybe even going higher if it continues at 9 out of every 10 ticket clip coming in on the favorite, given the betting volume we'll see here as compared to last weekend where some of the FanDuel folks said, hey, look, we saw 90% of the tickets on Arizona against Jacksonville, but clearly that volume going to be nowhere close to a standalone primetime game.
Yeah, you're right. And look, I think I would like to say that we won't move it. We made it 6.5. The market opened, I think, a little lower, maybe even as low as 5.5 elsewhere. We opened at 6.5. At 7, I don't see us just dangling a carrot to try and attract money on New England. It's not the way we operate. We don't want to do that. Obviously, the pressure of the entire market, I think, will probably move it there, particularly in the likes of Las Vegas, where that practice is pretty well established by now. So yeah, we may well get there on a consensus, but at 7.5, I think we'd probably be pretty heavily juiced towards New England, just given that we were the other side of the touchdown.
One last thing, Payne, I wasn't sure if you had any questions for John.
No, go for it.
One more I wanted to fire his direction, but when you look at the board, John, and you talked about the New York teams being a little bit undervalued as far as bettors are concerned, with the market slightly higher on key numbers, is there a team or two, at least through the first 3 weeks of the season, that you guys have felt, hey, the market completely disrespects, but we don't feel a need to really adjust their power rating yet, despite a poor performance? Or maybe in the case of some other teams that have exceeded expectations, that you haven't felt the need to kind of adjust up through the first couple contests?
I don't know that we haven't felt the need to necessarily adjust. I think there's been overreaction to some teams, though. I think for me, it was probably Los Angeles this week. We liked the Rams. We liked them preseason. We mentioned them. I think they were as short as 12-1, though, and we couldn't quite get them there. We still have them around about that probability, about 8% of winning the Super Bowl. So for us at 8-1, that's a really good lay for us, and a team I think we'll be pretty aggressive on. We saw that sharp move for Arizona this week, so maybe that's one that's inflated a little bit. Yeah, they've been impressive, but they might have had good spots in each of those games, and I think this matchup will be very different. I think we'll learn plenty more about them. We were high on Baltimore, high on San Francisco, and a little bit higher than most on New Orleans at the start of the season. And I think those three teams have gone reasonably well, particularly given some of the challenges that some of them have had individually. So we won't overreact. Like I said, we're heavily reliant and base a lot of our numbers on heavily weighted priors, and we're going to take another few weeks to adjust them. So probably find ourselves taking pretty gross spots, but we believe they're profitable long term.
It is the name of the game, especially as we get into the dog days of October and November, where you're rooting for teams that may be able to pull off 3 straight up victories all season long, and having the book's balance sheet hinge on those particular results. Hopefully, come Sunday night, you may see a little bit of an appetite for the underdog at some capacity, but I'm sure our listeners out there will feel no sympathy, John, with you guys needing the New England Patriots to try and get to the window. Best of luck, as always, this weekend. I can't thank you enough for the valuable insight you provide each and every Thursday here on the podcast.
No problem, guys. Enjoy it. Thank you.
Man, that's good, clean living from John. Takes a football Sunday off during the heart of the NFL campaign, travels out to Whistling Straits, albeit he probably couldn't have been thrilled with watching the Europeans get their tail kicked in by the Americans, but not a bad little respite 3 weeks into the NFL season.
Good, clean living there. Easy life. Never mind the rest of us just over here grinding in front of the odds screen, trying to beat those guys. That's what happens.
It's the power of 11 to 10.
The juice.
It's the power of 11 to 10 right there.
That's it. You can just, week 3, just hang out at a golf tournament, and we're just over here slaving in front of a screen for 12 hours a day. Easy life. We've chose the wrong side of this counter.
I was on that other side of the counter. Let me tell you, it wasn't that glamorous by any stretch of the imagination. So kudos to John. Glad he had a chance to get away from the office for a few days and go partake in some of those festivities. But, when we look at the games, Payne, and I know we haven't previewed it, but we will in a matter of moments, I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anybody that books will find themselves rooting for the home underdog on Sunday night with the New England Patriots.
No, that is what they're going to need. And I'll be candid. When you look at the matchup, I'm not necessarily sure that's the side that I would want to be backing here. But you also have to just kind of blindfold yourself and say, as I alluded to John, is Tampa really a 10-point favorite against the Saints on a neutral? I mean, they were a 3-point dog in Gillette Stadium last week. And so I understand there's probably some sharp guys that were smart and got out ahead and laid the 5.5 with the Bucs and said, hey, I'm going to have time to figure out this situation, and I can take back 7.5 on New England at some point on a cheap buy. I think you're going to see books forced to go to 7 across the board here. I really think that's going to happen, especially if the volume is what we think it can be. And I'm hearing and there are books telling me that they believe that this is going to be the most bet game they've ever had at their house, which is staggering, right? Like Super Bowl games, like some of the most bet stuff. This is kind of this is what the league wanted, right? I mean, they got Tom Brady against his old team in prime time with records on the line, Mac Jones, an Alabama quarterback that has a huge presence and brand, going against the guy who he's replacing. And it's going to be an interesting proposition here. No doubt, in terms of the line, the value is on New England, but the matchups and the situation don't necessarily favor
And
New
you
England.
mentioned that number right around a touchdown at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total in the game sits at 49 in this particular spot. And we can rattle off all the accolades and accomplishments for Tom Brady. 52-14 straight up, 47-18-1 against the spread in his career at Foxboro. 20 years he spent with Bill Belichick as his head coach. It's the longest tenured pairing of a player and coach or duo across the 4 major sports, 9 Super Bowl appearances, 6 titles, 249 wins together is 105 more than what Drew Brees and Sean Payton were able to accomplish. When you look at Brady, 28-6 straight up and against the spread, paying 82% on the road following a straight up loss. Now, the one silver lining for Patriots fans, Tom Brady, being the elderly man he is, has struggled when the sun goes down. More an anomaly than anything else. 0-9 against the spread the last 9 kickoffs after 7 o'clock Eastern, which I always find entertaining. The Patriots, they've been a huge under team. This is a team 9-1-1 under the total their last 11 games. 20 points per game for them offensively since the start of last season. Actually 28th in the NFL. But this is a game they're going to have to find a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball because I'm not quite sure this defense is going to be capable of keeping Tom Brady in check for a full 4 quarters.
Being able to, anticipate game flow and script really helps trying to figure out how things are going to unfold in some of these games. And I look at this side of the ball for New England, and it's really hard to envision the offense not being completely reliant on Mac Jones. JPP supposedly is questionable. We'll see if he ends up going. Didn't play last week. DNP on Wednesday's practice. He's a great run-setting edge. And Tampa's been not as dominant in years past, stopping the run, just 7th this year in defensive rush efficiency after back-to-back years at number 1. But still this season, less than 16% of yards gained on Tampa's defense have come on the ground. Teams have smartly gravitated away from that. Teams understand they can't do that. The Patriots' offensive line that we thought was going to be a real strength hasn't been. New England's been dead last in run block win rate. So this is going to be a Mac Jones game again, just like it was last week against the Saints. And so that would make me a little nervous unless Josh McDaniels is going to wake up and get his head out of his ass. He doesn't really have Mac Jones operating from formations he's been best at this year. What Mac Jones was asked to do at Alabama hasn't been really asked of him in New England through 3 weeks. You have a young quarterback, and for some reason, only 21% of his passes are coming from play action. Only 6 of his 56 dropbacks against the Saints had a play action element to them. His yards per pass attempt have declined each week now that defenses kind of know how New England wants to use him. This is just really a tough situation for me when I look at this. Like, you look at some of the personnel, and it's best suited to play from 12 formation. But Mac's been best with 3 wide sets, and the Patriots don't really have good enough receivers to consistently win from that formation. But at Alabama, Mac was best operating from heavy personnel. So it's just kind of a little bit of a mess there in terms of what New England's offense is. If the rain doesn't end up coming through in this game, which it looked like it was a little bit like a 52 to 64% chance of rain throughout the entire game yesterday, this morning that subsided a little bit. But Josh McDaniels is probably going to have Mac Jones throw it a bunch again here. And that is obviously the area where the Buccaneers are most vulnerable through the air. And they're now dealing with obvious injuries back there. It's why you went out and signed Richard Sherman on Tuesday. And really the reason Tampa lost last week was their third down defense. No other reason. Tampa actually kicked the shit out of the Rams and outplayed them substantially on early downs. The problem was when the Rams were forced to pass on third down, they took advantage of the Buccaneers' weakness. It kind of forced McVay to stop running a little bit and just like, hey, like third and medium, third and long. Now we're forced to pass and attack this weakness of the Bucs. The Rams averaged 15.7 yards per pass on third down, a 67% passing success rate with 8 first downs, 3 explosives, and 2 passing touchdowns. On the season, Tampa's allowed a league-high 9.1 yards on third down. So if you can kind of get to a manageable third down, it's possible Mac Jones will have some success there. So, for me, it's about Mac maybe, attacking that weakness and not just when he's forced on third down to throw. The Patriots' offensive line needs to be substantially better in pass protection. James White is obviously that safety valve out of the backfield, obviously a lesser version of CMC, but kind of did the same things. He's also one of their better backs in pass protection. It's possible some of the underneath stuff for New England works, where you're, throwing some short stuff against a cover 3 man team like Tampa. That's kind of one of the areas where cover 3 man can be a little bit vulnerable. You also have to wonder how Mac is going to do against the blitz. Defenses have really tried lighting him up. He's been blitzed 34% of his dropbacks. We know Todd Bowles loves to blitz. One of the highest blitz rates is in the league since he's been in Tampa. He's sending blitz right now in 41% of dropbacks. So watch for that as well. Can New England pick up blitz? Can the Patriots backfield help in protection when the blitz comes without James White? Are those young backs going to be able to identify the right blitzer to pick up? So there's a lot of things within this matchup that don't necessarily bode well for the Patriots offense unless somehow they are able to just attack that weakness of the Bucs secondary, specifically in the slot. But who is going to be that guy to consistently do it? Is it Jacoby Myers? Maybe. But the Patriots offense just doesn't have those kind of weapons to necessarily attack the areas where the Buccaneers are most vulnerable, like we saw a Rams team a week ago or the Dallas Cowboys in week 1 here.
Well, if the Patriots don't have schematic advantages with their offense matching up against the Tampa Bay defense, is there any reason to believe the heavy zone coverage we saw them employ last week against the New Orleans Saints will somehow be successful against Tom Brady and this high-flying Tampa Bay Bucs offense?
Yeah, that's the ultimate question. And I'm not quite sure what New England's defense is either. I mean, we have 3 data points. That obviously helps, right? Knowing who teams have played, who they've beaten, who they've gone against. That really needs to be one of the most important parts of your handicap when we kind of get to this part of the season. And it's just something to remember for the future. I absolutely think the Patriots defense has improved. Guys came back after opting out. You had some free agency pickups in the front 7. You've had some young guys that you've added via the draft the last 2 seasons that are helping. But New England's played offenses that rank 30th, 28th, and 19th in efficiency. A rookie, a second-year quarterback making his first road start with fans, and a quarterback that hasn't been a full-time starter since 2019. Those are the quarterbacks that New England's played. Tom Brady is obviously a little bit of a different animal. And, we can say Belichick knows all of Tom's weaknesses. He's watched more film on Tom than anybody, right? He studied Brady inside and out, and he knows Tom can make this throw, but he can't make that one anymore. If Belichick truly knew Brady's strengths and weaknesses, he wouldn't have won a Super Bowl for a different organization.
That's a very good point.
So,
very good point.
And so, that theory that I think we're going to hear might not, ring true here. We'll see. Last week, again, the Buccaneers offense didn't lose that game against the Rams. Tampa was uber efficient on first down, 6.7 yards a play, 54% passing success rate. Tampa was able to bypass second and third down on first down 11 times. They had 5 explosives on first down from Tom Brady. I mean, Tampa's offense is humming right now. Top 10 in both passing and rushing efficiency. Antonio Brown is due back from the Big C today. That's big since Scotty Miller is out with a turf toe injury. So you don't really lose Scotty Miller when you're getting Antonio Brown back. How does Belichick elect to defend Brady here? That was very poignant at the top there. Like, the knock on Tom, I guess, is that he couldn't handle pressure anymore, especially up the middle, where Tom would have to kind of move and quickly reset his feet before throwing to get enough juice on the ball. Right? That's why Belichick let him walk. So you would think Belichick goes man press, right, and clogs the box. I don't think the Patriots have the horses back there to play man against these receivers. Now, not a lot of teams do, but if you go zone, Tom's going to eat you alive. And the Patriots have used substantially less man and gone more zone at the start of this season because Stephon Gilmore's out. He's on IR. So is Bill going to run stunts and games up the middle along the line and then send blitzers into the A and B gaps to try to get that pressure? We'll see. But if you play zone and attempt to do that, I'm just going to take 5, 6, 7, 8 yards over the middle, outside, whatever it is. He's just going to pick you apart that way. What we do know through 3 games against the Dolphins offensive line, who rank 28th in pass block win rate, against Zach Wilson, who's been pressured on 47% of his dropbacks, second most in the league, and a Saints O-line that gave up a 61% pressure rate to Carolina the week prior, somehow the Patriots are just 24th in pass rush win rate. So I'm not really sure New England is able to get to the quarterback. I don't know if they're going to get to Brady. And so if that doesn't happen, you're starting to kind of run out of ways New England can defend Tampa Bay. Now, never underestimate Belichick, right? We could flip that game on and we're 17 minutes in and we're like, oh shit, he did it again, right? He came up with something. But when you just kind of think about how his personnel has to play, he's probably going to have to play some zone here again. And that's just not going to bode well. It just feels like, generally speaking, through 3 games, New England's faced incomplete offenses, especially passing offenses. It's just, it's a rookie in Zach Wilson. It's Tua, who doesn't really test or threaten you deep. It's a Saints offense without viable pass catchers. I just hope we get to see a clean game. I don't want any weather here. I don't want any rain coming in. Those are typically games where Belichick can muddy it up, and it might actually bode better for the books if there is a torrential downpour here. But it's just a very difficult game because you're looking at every matchup. You're looking at every situation, and it certainly favors Tampa Bay. It's just if you're a professional bettor, it's extremely difficult to just say, hey, I'm going to go lay 6.5 or 7 here with the Bucks when I could have taken the Saints +3 last week. And so that's ultimately the debate, and it's one where maybe it leaves us on the sidelines.
Yeah, I mean, these are the kind of games that I know a lot of recreational bettors are going to want to try and tango with one way or another. They're going to, I'm not going to say fall victim because that may be a little bit harsh to Tom Brady. And hey, look, if there's an opportunity for them to score to pile on late in the game, they may take full advantage of it. But you do wonder when it comes to how this game will get played on the field, the number factoring in, and all the other buzz, the posh and the pageantry. We've typically seen New England rise up in these spots in the past and find ways from a tactical standpoint to at least keep the game competitive. But, when you outline the cases there both ways, I don't think there's a compelling reason to run and bet New England right now, and maybe not even closer to kickoff, but we'll see how high this number actually gets, because I can tell you, having seen these patterns out here in the desert, there will be a couple books that'll be forced to flicker 7.5, especially if the public has their way on Sunday and has a lot of parlay liability going into either the Sunday night game, obviously a Tampa Bay money line, or Tampa minus the points, that could potentially escalate even further, knowing that the local boys and the Las Vegas Raiders will be playing the Chargers in a huge showdown on Monday night as well. So all a bunch.
And listen, if Mac Jones can come out and attack the Bucs secondary and do it successfully, they have a chance to cover. If New England can get pressure up the middle, something they haven't really been able to do this season, they have a chance. If they can hold up in man coverage, they have a chance. And if all 3 of those things happen, then they're going to certainly cover this number. But they're all tall tasks based upon the matchup and what we've seen.
It's one of those things that you run into some of the various options that are available in betting markets, and you go, well, if you like the Patriots here and you think they have a legitimate chance to win outright, do you just back Mac Jones to win Rookie of the Year at 4.5 to 1, figuring that if the Patriots are going to have success, they're not winning this game 13-10, and Mac is going to need a signature type game on a big stage, whether it's 2 or 3 touchdowns, 250 yards, that allows him to distance himself from some of his quarterback compatriots, or even the likes of Jamar Chase, who appears to be his closest competition, at least on paper right now.
Jamar Chase, baby. Big game Thursday night. I hear we're discussing that a little bit for our fine, friendly, degenerate
that
listeners.
We are, and I think we run the 2-minute drill on this one because I don't think it warrants a deep dive, but we did get a little bit of pushback from some of our listeners going, man, I can't believe you guys didn't dive into the Texans and Panthers game on Thursday night.
No need to talk Chiefs-Chargers when you can talk about the Texans on Thursday night.
You know what? If it's a standalone game, people are going to want to try and invest. And let's be thankful that this appears to be the last dog of a Thursday night game, as we'll get a slightly more aggressive slate as early as next week with the Seahawks and Rams. But alas, we do have a game on Thursday. It's the Bengals, more than a touchdown favorite, as they'll welcome in the number 1 overall pick, Trevor Lawrence, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Total in this game is leaked up a shade from 45 where it opened out to 46. And Payne, rather than break down some of the X's and O's in this one, I think the number is probably a good place to start. Is this finally a chance for Jacksonville to have a little bit of perceived value in the market, or have odds makers not been strong enough in their criticism, so to speak, with the numbers they're hanging on Jacksonville's ineptitude through the first 3 games?
You have a young team, obviously, with a young quarterback on a short week traveling. Typically, that does not bode well. What I have seen on this game, and I'll just be candid and outright and just tell you what I have seen so far. Money's come in on the over at 45. And it makes sense with Jesse Bates being out. He's the mistake eraser on the back end for Cincinnati. He's one of the best cover secondary players in the league. So that's what I've seen on the total. Looking at the core number, nothing else factored, this line should be more like Cincinnati minus 6.2. Obviously, a really tough game. I have not bet a penny on it yet. But suddenly you have a Cincinnati team that's going from 3 straight games as a dog to a large favorite. At the same time, Jacksonville's dropping down in class, right? Back-to-back games against the combined 6-0 Broncos and Cardinals. They lost their opener on the road to a veteran Houston team with Tyrod Taylor under center. The same Texans team that led in Cleveland before Tyrod went down. So this is a real tough game from my perspective to bet, because I've also been carrying the torch that Urban Meyer is past his time, have for multiple years. Don't see anything sophisticated coming out of this offense. Much more difficult to run this type of offense when you don't have 5-star recruits going against 3-star recruits. Everyone's pretty even here at this whole NFL thing. So you should always be betting the 1-point discrepancy through a key of 7, right? There's value there to do it. I just haven't gotten there yet. Typically, those are auto bets. Still doing some digging. Still need to talk to some of my guys to figure it out if we'll ultimately make that plunge. What I am hearing is, again, the over has been sharp in this. A lot of the larger prop players have been gravitating potentially to some of the Cincinnati Bengals receivers. Now, certainly the Jamar Chase buzz, the hype is at an all-time high. You go from not catching balls in the preseason to having 4 touchdowns. And obviously with T. Higgins out in this game, it probably means more Boyd, more Jamar Chase. And so I have been hearing that the Jamar Chase over yards is going to come in at some point. And that's all I've heard on this game. Personally, don't have a single bet on it as we sit here, 8:50 a.m. Vegas time. But I'm certainly poking around. And that's all I got in this one. You want to expound on anything?
No, I mean, I think raising the level of competition discussion is extremely valuable in this instance when you talk about a team that has gone from one of their bigger wins on Sunday against a divisional foe. I think it was the largest win for the Bengals at Heinz Field ever, to now having to run it back on a short week and not just go out there and win a football game, but do so convincingly against the team that hasn't really shown a heck of a lot. Now, you do wonder from Jacksonville's standpoint, you talk about that lack of sophistication we've seen from them start to finish, having to prepare a young quarterback to go in hostile territory on 3 days, never an ideal scenario. But I can understand completely where some of that over money's coming in. And the one angle that I'm intrigued to see is if we see Trevor Lawrence use his legs a little bit more against a team that plays a lot of man. I think there'll be some opportunities for Lawrence to scramble out of the pocket. When I look at his rushing props, I think that might be a market that, as I have a chance to dig in a little bit later on Thursday afternoon, will be one that may potentially catch my eye.
Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, we're looking at Cincinnati right now at 2-1. They were underdogs in all 3 games. And that's fine to say, hey, the market didn't really respect them enough. But Minnesota pissed that game away in the opener. 10 accepted penalties in the first half. Dalvin Cook fumbles in overtime going in for a score. You get crushed by the Chicago Bears. You're down 20-3 late in that game. You have 2 late touchdowns inside of 5 minutes to make it look respectable. And last week, it's awesome. You slayed the dragon. You beat your rival as a dog on the road. But boy, was that dog beaten and battered. I mean, that was probably one of the largest moves I've seen through 3 weeks in the NFL. Open 4.5, closes 2.5. Huge move there. So you kind of knew the outcome before the game even started. And so you went out there and you did your job, and that was fantastic. But this is a much different game when you go from being a dog in 3 straight to now needing to win by more than a touchdown.
Oh, there's no doubt it's a massive role reversal in every sense of the word. So we'll see how they are able to handle prosperity in this particular spot. So interesting game just because we'll get a matchup of the former number 1 picks going head-to-head, but clearly 2 teams, or at least 1 team unfamiliar with prosperity in the Bengals and a team that hasn't realized any success in a short 3-game tenure in the Jacksonville Jaguars. All right, my friend, we've broken down 5 games in depth, lightly touched on what we think we'll see transpire on Thursday. I have the team mascot that has not stopped barking for the last 15 minutes, so we tested the mute button on this newfangled microphone technology, so I apologize to the listeners in advance. But when we're looking for a potential investment this weekend, my friend, is there anywhere you think we should be best inclined to try and plunk down our cash?
There was a couple options for us, and I'm going to go to the one that I have bet already. We were contemplating moving on potentially 2 totals today. We haven't done it yet, so let's go to the 1 o'clock game. Washington at Atlanta. FanDuel currently dealing Washington moneyline minus 115. Let's go with the football team. And when I look at this game, it just feels like there's not only value in the number. I know that it's not the best number right now. Could have taken 1 plus 1 on Washington a little bit earlier in the week, but the value isn't zapped out of it. And from a perception standpoint, you have a Washington team and a national audience get lucky to beat the Giants, and then they get blown out by Buffalo. And you have an Atlanta team that hung on tight against Tom Brady and the Super Bowl champions, and they beat the Giants last week. Forget the fact that Atlanta was a minus 16 in net success rate last week, trailing 14-7 at the winless Giants without Sterling Shepard and Slayton. Past the value, I think the matchup is very good. Washington's defensive front should be able to eat against one of the league's worst offensive lines. You're seeing a secondary in Washington that struggled a little bit, coming down in class, facing a team with just Calvin Ridley, really, as opposed to Stephon Diggs and 4 other guys in Buffalo. You flip it around to the other side of the ball. Taylor Heinicke is going to have time in the pocket because Atlanta's got one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL. It's why Dean Pease is constantly forced to blitz. Terry McLaurin is going to have a much easier matchup this week than going against Tre'Davious White. You also have to monitor the situation. Is A.J. Terrell going to be out again this week? We'll see. I just think there's matchup advantages for Washington on both sides of the ball, and you're getting value in the number. So let's go ahead, lay the Washington money line, minus 115 at FanDuel, and that will be the best.
Taylor Heinicke, we trust. around these Bet the Board corporate offices. We'll hope for a bounce-back performance in the wake of Washington's dreadful effort against a game Buffalo Bills side last Sunday. I think it makes for an awful lot of promising opportunity and upside for Washington here, both on the offensive and defensive side of the things. Important time to remind...
Also will be a big bonus, by the way, if somehow Curtis Samuel is able to
That's
go.
what I was going to say.
That's a coin flip right now. Return to practice on Wednesday. Today is a big day. Hoping to get a nice little report sent to my phone. And if Curtis Samuel's a go, then obviously that provides that secondary weapon that the Washington offense desperately needs behind McLaurin and Gibson.
You would love to have all hands on deck for this particular spot, as Washington will look to even up their record at 2-2 on the young season. Perfect time to remind all of you, our loyal listeners, to follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. You can also follow John Sheeran as well at JSheeran, JSHEERAN1981, and interact with him throughout the course of the weekend. I would be remiss as well if I didn't encourage all of you to go to FanDuel.com/BetTheBoard. The links are available in all of our posts should you not write it down correctly. And for new users, plenty of enhanced odds, $1,000 free bets, so many different ways to give you an opportunity to maximize that betting bankroll as early as this weekend. For Payne Insider, I'm Todd Furman. I want to thank all of you, our loyal listeners, for tuning in as you do each and every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday throughout the season. Also encourage you to go to youtube.com, search Bet the Board, subscribe to our Bet the Board pregame show. It drops Fridays at noon Eastern. We break down a couple of the games you've heard here and take things in a variety of different directions, along with some of the top voices in the industry to make all of you smarter, more informed investors as the season progresses. Come Sunday afternoon with a Washington football team ticket in hand, we'll see you at the window.